Hi guys, it's Coach Joe Micela, Performance One Advanced Sports Training in 2012 Olympic team coach. We get asked a lot about expectations of an athlete coming into the sport of Olympic weightlifting. Like, what are those expectations? Not only for our facility and what that means, but also as you're moving up the levels, within the sport to the ultimate level of being a senior world team member or an Olympic team member. And in our gym, we have kind of a tier system of expectations in one regard because of, what you really want out of it. We have everything from individuals that want to do it for fun and to just see there as a kind of a hobby for them to do it and just really kind of do the activities, do the movements and compete locally. And then those that want to take it, and they're using these movements as part of their strength and conditioning for another sport. We see that as, Olympic weightlifting from a strength and conditioning side of it has been a great cross-training sport for a lot of athletes. They may have been a football player or a wrestler, and we're using these movements, and then maybe they dabble here or there at a local event, maybe even a regional event, but it's always been a secondary thing for them. And then we have athletes that the expectation is they want to make this their sport. So then we take it to that level, that expectation of now you want to do this as your main sport, not a hobby in the earlier ones, not as a secondary sport for something else, but this is your main thing. So with that comes certain standards that we want to have, okay? In all three of those cases, technically we want them to be the same. I don't care if you're recreational, you're doing it as a secondary sport, or it's your primary sport. I teach everyone the same, okay? You can walk into my gym and you'll look and there'll be on the platform 6 or 7 or 8 different people, and they may be in all three of those categories. I want a person that walks in going, wow, you have a room full of weightlifters. Technically, I want them to all see the same thing. That's a standard that I want to have. I've had other coaches go, Johnny, he's just doing this for fun, so we kind of be loose on some of his technique. Or, this guy is a football player, so we don't really teach him this aspect of racking the bar for his cleans because we don't think it's really that necessary. And then you give everyone the full boat, that wants to do it. I know a long time ago, USA Weightlifting, and I think they still may have it, had your level 1 Olympic weightlifting certification, and then they had a separate certification that they called their sports performance certification, where it was basically teaching Olympic lifting movements to strength coaches that were going to implement it in a general strength and conditioning program. It was trying to kind of compete with the NSCA's National Strength and Conditioning Association certification. It was really dog shit. Okay, and then the manual was basically dog shit, and the manual basically only had like a quarter of the technical drills that we had for our level 1, which our level 1 was teaching people how to train Olympic weightlifters. And I would get coaches that go, hey, I want the technical understanding that you do in the level 1, but I don't know whether or not I'm going to coach anyone into the sport, but I want to have that technical background. So there was that need and the desire. So I feel that we need to teach everyone the same. And then what they do with that information down the road is up to them. But at the same time, we want to have that standard. So that means, well, what is the expectation of that athlete that comes in? Well, not only that you have to understand we're going to be technically sound, but, how do you approach your practice? So even if you are doing this recreationally, I want you to be attentive. I want you to give a shit. I don't want you to take reps off. I don't want you to be lackadaisical in your approach. One, these movements can hurt you if you're not paying attention, if you're not engaged in the moment. It's not like you're aimlessly doing a bicep curl where it's like, I could be thinking about lunch, I could be thinking about my taxes, I could be thinking about, what my girlfriend's doing on a Tuesday. With doing a high percentage snatch, you can't do that. Because you're distracted, all of a sudden you may lose where that bar is, and now you've dropped it, and you could have dropped it on yourself. Same thing with the clean. I'm not really fully engaged in the pull, and next thing you know, I catch it, and my elbow hits my thigh, and now I just sprained, or even worse, broke my wrist because I wasn't 100% engaged in that movement. So we try to now teach that into the athlete. Well, I don't care what level you are, you be engaged in what you're doing, okay? Because if not, this will hurt you. This will, sacrifice that. Plus, for me as a coach, Do I want a platform with I have 3 or 4 people that are super dialed in, standing next to a platform that people are like half in, half out? And this platform over here, these people are like recreational, so they don't really give a shit and they're dicking around. Well, pretty soon that dicking around mentality will spread to that next platform. It will spread even to the most serious competitor. Okay, because now he's kind of like, feeling this, I want to, this, I'm going to do what these guys are doing. Okay, or he's struggling or she's struggling to now combat that. And we don't want that. We want that mindset to be, professional. We want that mindset to be dialed in so that everyone has that in there. And I think that even trickles into then our national program. When we did have a national training center, we were picking people that were coming from, it started recreationally, they thought that they were doing it pretty good, and next thing you know, they moved up the chain. Or they were a 2-sport athlete. Maybe they were a 2-sport athlete at a high level, a D1 level, or even a world level in another sport. Then they came into Olympic weightlifting. They may have been a high-level CrossFitter. Then they came in. But they're always that 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and they didn't really gauge and put their 100% into us, what I call that give a shit attitude into this. And then you had the person that came up through the system and then was dialed in. That has to be trained in somebody. That has to be disciplined in somebody. There has to be that expectation of all those levels, of all those different, verging points of coming into the sport, okay? Having that standard of expectation, showing them that pathway of this is how we do it. To our counterparts from other countries, like in the old Soviet Union, or even in China, or even in Bulgaria, or even some of these other more successful, systemized countries, they had that path. They had that level of expectation. In 2003 at the World Championships in Vancouver, Canada, I was in the press conference room for the heavyweights, the plus 105s at the time. And you had Hussein Rezazadeh, you had Victor Skrabardis, and you had Velichko Cholokov from Bulgaria. And Velichko Cholokov from Bulgaria was recently just graduated out of the junior ranks, and he was a last-minute addition to the Senior World Championships that year to try to qualify an Olympic slot for 2024 in Athens. And a reporter asked him, hey, you haven't been training with the national team, and you basically just got picked up from a regional training facility and got put on this senior team to do this event. How did you handle that kind of, pressure and, that adaptation? And he says, well, there was a standard set at every level. He said there was a standard set at my level, my regional level where I was at, to prepare me for this situation, that I could be called upon at any time. So when the opportunity was given to me, I wasn't like shell-shocked. He'd already been on junior world teams. He'd already been on junior European teams. He had been up and down for different training camps at a high level. So when he was then brought into that situation, he wasn't freaking out. He was also dedicated because of, he gave a shit at those different levels coming up. He was shown the pathway to success by mentors and coaching peers that said, this is my expectation for you now. This is going to be my expectation for you down the road. You are now on the pathway. You're in the pipeline to be successful. I think in America, we don't do that, and that's a problem. Now, one, we don't have a system like they did in Bulgaria at the time. But even at our level, to even have this pathway, I don't even think coaches, even in America, teach these kids that are coming up, this is your pathway to success. One, maybe they not have had an athlete to the world level, and that's fine. But there still should have been a mentorship program from our coaches at higher levels on our national coaching staff to explain that to our coaches, and it hasn't been done. Our current coaching staff doesn't do that, okay? They just don't, for whatever reason. They don't know how to do it, or they don't want to do it, or they don't do it. So to have that understanding to now regional level coaches, you have a successful kid. He's showing promise. Explain to him these are these pathways of expectations of how they can handle themselves nationally, how you handle yourself internationally, how you handle yourself day to day. People want to have these training camps, and people forget that not only part of the training camp is going there and training with your peers, but it's also learning how to tie your shoes, cut your steak, and to brush your teeth. And what I mean by that is saying how you do all the little things. to make it to the next level. You know, learn from better people, learn from people of experience, successful experience that now can take you to that. Okay. And then also too, as a coach, you're going to go, all right, this guy is really good. This girl is really good, but they don't do the little things. Okay. Well, we know that if they do these little things, it creates habits. It creates a mindset. All right. And that's that habits and mindsets that we want them to be successful. You know, we don't want them to be like wishy-washy, that they take things for granted. They take this as a joke. You know, I want them to be serious. I want them to take this. We're in a very critical time period in weightlifting in America that we can take this springboard into an elite international standard because we're also hosting the Olympics in 2028. But that starts now with these habits, with this pathway of understanding so that me as a coach can tell another coach, hey, I may not currently have this kid. I did at a high level on that trajectory chart, but you do. Okay? Listen to advice. Listen to these little steps. I remember in 2019, I was sitting in Cuba at a dinner table with a coach that had like the best female athlete on our team at the time. And you could tell like this was his golden goose. He got, I don't want to say lucky, but he did. He didn't have experience prior to her, and he hasn't had experience since her. But at that time, he was the man because he had this girl. And I was kind of trying to have some, you know, break bread with him and have a conversation with him and say, hey, you know, I was kind of where you were, dude. You know, going into, you know, the quad of 2012, I was kind of where you are, you know, and just talking to him like chit chat, how's it going? How you doing? And he was kind of like, I got it, dude. I got it. And I was like, all right, man, you got it. You know, but why wouldn't you take advice from someone that was been there, done that? You know, at least listen. I'm not saying you had to follow exactly what I was telling you to do or exactly what I did with my athlete at that time, but at least listen, you know, and then use that information for what you were. Hey, I like this part of it. I didn't like this, what he did. I like this, I like that. But experience does help, okay? And to have that standard of, he didn't even know what the standard was because he was walking into the situation completely dark. Little bit with me when I had that in my run with one of my athletes, but at the same time, I reached out to different people, both in American and internationally, because there wasn't an established protocol, because we didn't have a formal system in America that gave a shit, you know, that had some type of mentoring program for our coaches. So we have to mentor those coaches. We have to mentor those athletes. We have to have those athletes understand this is that way and that path that's going to help you reach to the next level. Okay? Part, there's going to be sacrifices. Part, there's going to be this immense dedication. Part, it's the little things that you need to do. Okay? On top of you showing up every day and grinding it out in the gym. I think if we do that and we push our athletes and our coaches to that higher standard of expectation, we're going to rise everyone up, because this guy in Pennsylvania now shows that he's having a higher standard of coaching and production. This guy or girl in Florida is having that. This guy or girl in Arizona is having that. Okay, we can't always be just this like Yahoo wild cowboys that are running around and then just hope that it sticks. And then we're going to go, oh, well, we had success in 2024 Olympics with a couple of athletes. Well, how do we duplicate that? How do we spread that across America? Well, if everyone did their own thing, you're basically going like, well, which one do we listen to? Which one do we just take it for granted? Or do we reach out that one particular coach and say, hey, his way is the way, or the other coach and say his way is the way? We don't. But we could learn certain similarities between all those athletes and get that information out there. There's a lot of I've met a lot of young and eager coaches out there that are coming into this sport, and they're getting opportunities to work with really, really talented athletes. You know, I want to provide that service as a mentor to those coaches too, you know. Ask me certain questions, you know, like I said, you know, I want to learn from you too. You may be seeing something different now than I just saw, you know, in my run as a younger coach going up and through that stuff. But if we can have that standard of those expectations of saying, this is what you do, okay? You show up, okay? You show up early. You do your accessory exercises. You do your rehab exercises. You then carry and hold your other teammates accountable. Again, the ones that are taking it as serious as you. But also learn to minimize distractions. with those teammates that are not taking that seriously. The coach has to learn that, maybe move those people to a different time or move them to the other side of the gym or have a saying to them and say, hey, Bob's going for this heavy lift. You need to kind of shut up, okay? And don't say shit and don't be dicking around on the side. Let him focus. Where the gym is completely silent to the point where we used to turn the radio down for a heavy lift to give that athlete their complete and utter dedication and the respect of the room for that heavy lift. Have that standard in your gym. Then when we're having these training camps, have that. When you go internationally, dress appropriate when you fly. Dress appropriate when you enter that room. So they look at you like, man, this guy is serious. Take your notes. Be detail-oriented when you're traveling internationally, okay? Don't make it a joke and you sit there and doing crazy faces for TikTok, okay? There is a time and place for that self-promotion and marketing. There's also a time and place where people see that you are at a higher level. And that success and that understanding and that poise that you have as an athlete will carry, okay, and will trickle down to other people. I know when we brought in a high-level lifter from Mexico, she was already an Olympian in 2008, and she came and trained with us. It was unbelievable, her presence, her workman's approach, because she was a professional. This was her career as being a weightlifter. So when she showed up on time or early. She showed up early, I should say. She did all the little details. She carried herself with such a presence that it started trickling to everyone who was around her. And I would say, take this as serious as that girl. Take this as serious as that. She stayed extra. She did her cool down. She did this. She would ask questions. She would write detailed notes. She would ask how I can improve myself for the next time. That was huge. I think coaches and athletes need to see that. Sometimes it's the coach. How many times do you see at a national meet, the coach shows up in flip-flops, his head's on backwards, and his shirt's all wrinkled, and he looks like a slob. I've seen American coaches do that in international competitions. I'm like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And then our upper coaching staff would be like, oh, I don't know if I should say anything to him or not. I'm like, yeah, throw his ass out of here. Dress appropriately. Don't look like you're going to a freaking bonfire, okay? Dress appropriately. Have an attitude. Have this professionalism about you. Don't look like a friggin' slob. Take it seriously. I've seen like beanies on coaches' heads and, they just don't look, they have a chew in their mouth. They don't even look like they're ready to do this in any type of seriousness. And a professionalism that if a young athlete or parent was looking on TV or looking at that as this is the pinnacle of what we want our kid to follow, and they look like that. I'm not saying you got to wear a three-piece suit, but at the same time, I said there has to be this balance, okay? Guys, a lot of people are watching our site, and we really appreciate it, and our channel. Please send us any questions you may have with our program. Whether it's strength and conditioning, Olympic weightlifting, we'd like to hear from you. But please click and like and share our channel. Appreciate it.